So the session that we'll be covering today is around Power Apps and Power Automate. Now, this is all part of the Power Platform suite that's available within Office 365. And specifically within the Power Platform, we'll be covering, providing an overview of what the Power Platform is, and then diving into some examples with, Power Apps and Power Automate, trying to understand what that is. Trying to understand what the common data services that's included with Office 365, and then licensing options, when it comes to the Power Platform, some common usage scenarios, and usage governance around the whole platform. Now, Power Platform might be a little new for a lot of people, so I just want to provide a brief introduction for what this is. You might have dabbled with it, or maybe not even really looked into it. But I wanted to provide a brief introduction of what this platform is about, and then dive into some more detail. So the very first thing to understand is, Power Platform is a tool that provides power, brings the powers to the user, to the end user. So when you think of a typical institution, an app needs to be built, there is a lot of work involved in building an app in a traditional way. There's a lot of data which needs to be gathered, and then there's, you have to reach out to developers to build the app, and then there's also, all the devices that you have to take into consideration for, what the devices the students and staff might be using to access these apps. And there's going to be a lot of students who are working remotely, a lot of staff that are remote. So there's all those considerations that also have to be taken into account. And building an app from scratch like this is also a very expensive process. And a lot of these apps also need to be geared towards mobile devices and tablets. So it's not building a traditional app like in the old sense. So a lot of these factors impact how apps are built, and apps are going to be built in the future. So one way that Microsoft is helping bridge the gap is to make this platform available, which is a low-code, no-code platform where users can build applications very easily. So let's see what we mean by low-code, no-code app. So when we talk about the Power Platform, there is three main areas that encompass what a Power Platform is. Power BI, which is basically the tool to create and generate reports within Office 365, and then there's Power Apps, which is more so the tool that is used to build forms and act upon certain requests, and Power Automate, which is basically a workflow tool, which helps process information, which helps create approval tasks, which helps automate all the business process flows within the institution. All of these tools are fairly well connected. All of them work together and to form the entire ecosystem of the Power Platform. Power Apps and Power Automate specifically work very closely hand in hand. When you build any Power App, it's almost no-brainer to have a Power Automate solution work right behind the scenes with the Power App. There are some advanced capabilities also available with the Power App. With the Office 365 license of Power Apps, there is capabilities to build solutions within the realm of Office 365, utilizing all the products available within Office 365, such as SharePoint, OneDrive, Planner, Tasks, Teams, all of that. There are additional capabilities available. One of them is what is called a common data service, which basically forms the core of all the data that's going to be stored. There are some connectors also available to connect with external applications, and there's hundreds of connectors available, and Microsoft is constantly adding to this. So if there is connectors that are required for plugging into external systems, plugging into external databases, whatever you have, these data connectors make it a very powerful tool to be able to extend the capabilities of Power Apps and Power Automate. And there is also a component called AI Builder, which we'll briefly touch upon. This is gets more into the advanced capabilities of Power Automate, and we'll see how that is also something which can be used. So as I mentioned, the common data service ends up being the core of the Power Platform. With the Office 365 license, there is a free version of the common data service that is available with the native seeded Power Apps and Power Automate license. We'll dive into the licensing and CDS capabilities a little more further down the presentation. But I did want to mention this so everybody understands that the common data service is basically the core of the Power Platform. Now, when you build apps with a tool such as Power Apps, there's one thing that you don't have to worry about. That is, building these apps and making them available on different devices. By default, any apps that are built with Power Apps automatically works with mobile devices, tablets, and desktops, and kind of frees the user from focusing on how is this really going to render, and rather focusing on the core functionality of what they want to build. Now, this is something which this is a tool which can be utilized by faculty and staff to try to build simple automation, try to build simple classroom type applications. We'll look at a couple of examples later. So when they're focusing on building those kind of applications, they don't really have to worry about how it's going to be displayed on a particular device. It automatically is supported on most common platforms. iPhones, Android devices, Surface laptops, Surface tablets, iPads, and most other desktop devices. The other component that we're talking about, the Power Automate component, basically makes it very easy to model your processes. This is built. These Power Automate applications can be built quite easily using the browser, using the options to drag and drop controls and actions and define the conditional logic, and build these kind of solutions. Now, keep in mind, this is targeted towards someone that's like a power user or has some slight experience with programming in the past. So concepts such as branching or loops, things like that should be common for that user. So most business users who are comfortable with trying to leverage Excel or have used any kind of form builder tool in the past will be comfortable with building Power Apps and Power Automate solutions. And as I mentioned previously, the Common Data Service is something that's available with the Power Platform. Any content and data that's created can be stored within SharePoint lists or Excel files within OneDrive or any place like that. Or to build a more robust solution, the Common Data Service can also be leveraged. Within the Office 365 toolkit, there is a free version of Common Data Service that's available with the Power Platform and with the Power Automate and Power App license built in with Office 365. There are also upgrades available, and we'll cover that in the section on CDS and licensing. So when we talk about Power Apps, there's a few common types of Power Apps that can be built. So we'll dive into that. The most common scenario, which is probably the most widely used, is what are called Canvas apps. And this is the default way in which an app is built. And once we're done with this, I'll jump in and show you a quick demonstration of how these apps are built. So the most common scenario is to build an app with with what is called Canvas apps. And as you can see here, this is something which can be very easily built with someone who has some experience with building apps or creating forms or anything like that. And you can build apps without writing any code. And these apps can easily be deployed for mobile devices and browsers. These apps are, as I mentioned, can be built for both web and mobile devices. It connects to several data sources, 250 and counting. And these could be solutions provided by Microsoft or other cloud providers, other cloud service providers. There's a lot of functionality which can also be built into these apps that include things like camera, GPS, maps, all those kind of rich functionality can also be built into these apps. So it's not only limited to form entry, but has a richer end user experience as well. The other type of apps which can be built with Power Apps are called model-driven apps. This is probably something that you might experience in a environment where you are leveraging a CRM such as Dynamics 365. It ends up being a much richer version of an app that you can build, where the focus is more so on implementing the business rules and business process flow, and then the apps automatically are generated. The front end for the apps is automatically generated based on all the rules. Now, this is probably something that might be used in a back office, admissions type of environment where There is a tracker that's used for tracking all the students that are applying to a school, or tracking student enrollment or things like that. This is a tool which could be used. A model-driven app could be used in that type of scenario. So it's not necessarily geared towards your students, but it's more so geared towards back office staff that would be managing large volumes of student records or applications or so. And as I mentioned, with the model-driven apps, the focus is more so on building the business logic and not so much on worrying about the end-user experience. And these business model-driven apps are available with an advanced license, and that is also covered a little later in this presentation. But as you can see here, the focus is more so on building, the back-end logic, and the front-end UI will automatically be generated. There's also workflow capability associated with model-driven apps. So there is, a way to easily track what stage of the process you are in. For instance, if you're accepting, if you're processing student applications, it's very easy to track what stage of processing they are in, and then, completing that application and admission process for the students. This is an example of what the business process flow looks like in the back end. So as you can see, with the process flows defined, the end user experience and the end user UI is automatically generated based on all the conditional logic and the business process flow that's defined in the back end. Yet another type of Power App which can be built is what is called Power Apps for external users. Now, this is a new feature which was introduced by Microsoft compared to the other two types of apps which can be built. This is more so. Think of this as a portal which can be introduced for any users that are coming in from outside. So if there's new staff that are getting onboarded, new students that are trying to come in and to find information about the university, you can have an external facing portal where they can come in and sign in, and you have a very dedicated experience, very secure and dedicated experience for for these external users trying to come in. So before we continue on further, I'm going to switch over to the Power Platform, to the Power Apps window, and then I'll show you some examples of how the apps can be built. So this is a simple example. This is a demo environment that I have. This is a demo tenant where I'm logged in and I'm trying to create new apps. The very first thing I want to dive into is being able to build Power Apps. So this is the interface when if you have Office 365 and you're logged in and you're licensed for Power Apps, this is something this is what you would see. When you try to log in and try to look at apps, you'll see that there's a lot of different apps that can be built. So I'm going to go in here and I'll say these are the 3 different types of apps which can be built. And when I try to create a new Canvas app, there's 2 different options. One is I can start with I can start by identifying a certain data source. So if I know there's an app that I want to build, which is going to be leveraging content within SharePoint or OneDrive, or there's content that I have for that I want to connect with from external applications or external services, I can do that as well. So if you notice, if there's contents that you have in a file system, if you have content in Google Sheets, if you have content in all these other types of systems, Oracle, SQL Server, so any of these are options that you have where you can connect to and try to retrieve data from those sources. Now, some of them might require an additional license. This is why it's tagged with a diamond, which means it requires a premium license. But you do have the options to connect all those types of applications. The other one also is there is a lot of pre-built templates that are available. So when you try to build your own app, you can create an app for either a tablet or a phone, and you can create this from blank. Otherwise, you can also build all the apps based on different types of templates that are available. So if you notice, there's a lot of pre-built options that can be used for building your apps. So this is something to start off with. If you're new to Power Apps and you want to play around with it, this is a good way to start. Or the other option is to basically build an application from scratch. So I'll go through the option of building applications from scratch. And you can see how simple it is to build this app. So all of this, the application build can be done on the browser itself. So one good advantage of this is if you, irrespective of what type of license you have, whether it's A1, A3, or A5, you can actually leverage and start building Power Apps and Power Automate flows because everything happens directly on the browser. Now the interface that you see is probably similar to other form-based apps that you might have built or might have worked with. There's the option to create different types of connectors, so you can leverage, as I mentioned earlier, you can connect to any of these data sources and retrieve information from there. There's options to modify your screen and insert different types of controls. So you can insert a label, a button. You can have text fields, different types of controls that you can add onto the screen and start building the application that way. So it's fairly intuitive, fairly straightforward when you start building these applications. And there, as I mentioned, AI Builder is one of the options that is available. We'll dive into that a little later. As you can see, there is a lot of rich options available. You have options like data table, gallery, charts, media. So a lot of these type of controls can also be embedded into these forms. So it is a very full feature, rich option available for building your apps. I'm going to switch back to my presentation. And the next thing we'll dive into is Power Automate. Now, as I mentioned, Power Automate goes hand in hand with Power Apps. Think of Power Automate as a tool that can be used for automating your business processes, automating different kind of workflows that you have that you're trying to build. So, for example, a Power Automate approach, a Power Automate flow might be something that you build where you want to send approval notices on documents that you're working on, or send an email reminder to your students on a daily basis to have them complete their assignments, or anything along those lines. It could be as simple as sending out email notifications. It could be as complex as you want it to be based on all the other external entities you can connect to, or have different kind of branching statements, and so it could actually be pretty complex as to how you want to build it. The most common scenario, as I mentioned, is being able to build approvals, being able to copy data from one source to another, being able to perform simple mathematical calculations, data operations, and so on. And a few common scenarios, as it's described here, automated approvals. So if you want to send out email approvals, it can be automated. You can do that. One good thing about being able to send automated approvals through Power Automate is that the approvals can actually be completed from an email. So if someone receives an email which says, hey, you need to take a look at this activity, make sure this is good, complete it, they have an option within their email itself to either approve or deny that activity so the approval can proceed. This can be performed on a mobile device. It could be performed on any kind of tablet or any kind of desktop as well. So it makes it very easy for people that are mobile or are remote that can very easily participate in the workflow process without having to physically be in front of a computer. A few other examples are being able to perform recurring activities, expire information, send out emails, automated triggering, any information that needs to be sent out whenever updates happen to a certain document or a certain file. There's also workflows that can be triggered based on actions within a Power App. So if someone's submitting a button, clicking on a button to submit a form, you can kick off a workflow behind the scenes that could do anything with the app, such as capture that information, post it into a SharePoint list, or post it into a different different environment, whatever needs to happen with that data. And what does the flow look like? We'll dive into this with an actual example, but as I mentioned earlier, it's a very simple structure. There's always a trigger that is required to trigger the flow. This could be either an automated process or it could be a manual trigger. There's also actions which can be added on after that. The actions could be there's numerous actions available, and we'll run through a few of them as an example. So email notifications is a very common action. and also being able to step through and then create additional steps and then additional branching conditions as part of the flow as well. So when you talk about what all makes up a flow, triggers and actions, diving into that in a little more detail. The triggers can actually be linked to a host of external applications. So it's not only activities which happen within Office 365, you can actually set up these triggers based on activities and external applications as well. So if you have an external SQL database and you want to trigger an action based on when a data on a row changes, you can do that. If you're using a separate CRM and you want to trigger an activity based on a new entry in that CRM, you can do that as well. There's a lot of rich integration available with Flow, which makes it very powerful. In fact, Flow is built more so as a solution for all of Office 365 and for all the cloud services available, and not so much strictly for SharePoint or other solutions. So it is very powerful in all the services that it can connect to. The other component of every workflow is the action, and as you can see here, each action has its own custom set of fields that you can update. So in this case, if it's an email notification, there are certain fields that you can update. A lot of this information can actually be dynamic as well. So in this example, trying to pull information from the record. So when a record is updated, an email notification goes out. So automatically, when you tie your flow to the trigger, there's all this content that becomes available that you can feed into your flow. So you're able to pull information on the record and then be able to automatically update your email in the scenario and send it out. When we talk about the characteristics of automated flows, as I mentioned, there's a summary. Every event can starts with an event. Every flow starts with an event or a trigger. You can perform any number of actions. There are some limitations for how many actions you can perform in a day. But we'll dive into that, and then you can have conditional logic, and you can also call other workflows. This is very powerful because you can build a small application, small business process automation, and you can start building upon it and expanding its functionality by building other workflows and calling it. So you can daisy chain all these workflows and put them together to build a large business application. So I'm going to switch over to the interface for Power Automate so you can see how this works. So this is the interface for Flow. So if you log into Office 365 and you want to build your own Power Automate Flow, this is the interface you come to. Now there's a few options here. I can always go in here and then create a new flow, and based on the options available, I can create a flow from a template, or I can have an automated flow or an instant flow, and this is what we were talking about. You can schedule a flow as well. So if you want to run a job on a weekly basis, that is something which is definitely possible. I'm going to click the option of create from a template, so just so you can see what all the different options are. So as you can see, there's a ton of different templates that are available that Microsoft has made available, which makes it very easy to start off by building a task. So if you want to, let's say, create a task and planner for Microsoft Forms and post a message in Teams. So you also have cross application connectivity where you can have a flow that integrates with multiple tool sets out there. There is also obviously tools where you can connect workflows where you can connect to external applications and external services. Common data service is one. You can connect to Google Drive as another. So there's several applications that you can connect to, which makes it very easy to build these type of automated flows. What I'm going to do, I'm going to dive in and I'll create a flow from scratch just so we can explore some of the options available for connectivity. So I'm going to, let's say, automate it from blank. And simple flow. And I'm going to say, I'm going to link this to when task is assigned to me. Okay. So here, so when a task is assigned to me, so if I'm using Planner, if it's available in the system, anytime a task is assigned to me in Planner, I can have this workflow automatically run. So there's, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different actions available, a lot of different connectors available. So I can do things like email, So if you notice, there's several options that I can integrate with email. I can flag an email, send email with options. I can mark emails as read. So anytime something happens in Planner, I can actually have automatic emails go out. You can also explore the different kind of standard connectors available. As you can see here, there's connectors for all of these different type of applications. Most of the standard connectors fall within what is available within in Office 365. So by trying to link to options, or trying to link to connectors in Outlook, or trying to work with Office 365 groups or SharePoint lists or anything like that, those are all standard and built fall under the standard and built-in connectors. There's also premium connectors. So when you talk about premium connectors, these are all additional connectors that you can link up to. So if you have external application that you're using, if you're making an HTTP request, if you're trying to use Jira, if you're trying to use any of these type of applications, it makes it very easy to connect to them and perform activities. You can also create your own connectors if it gets to that point. If you have your own custom proprietary application and you want to be able to connect to that, that option is also available. But as you can see, it makes it very easy to leverage any of these connectors and start building your applications based on that. So let's just pick email as an option. This is one of the simple ones that you're looking at. So I can send email. If I pick this option, obviously it gives me the options that I can configure. So to subject and then the body, and when I click on these options, I also have this dynamic pop-up which allows me to pull information based on the trigger. So in this scenario, the trigger is going to be a task and planner that's assigned to me. So when that happens, it automatically brings in dynamic content based on a task. So I can obviously bring in information about the title of the task, the due date, all of these values which are available associated with the task is available for me to use within this email now. So I can send an email notification whenever a task is assigned to me with all these different values in it. So just an example for how you could build a flow. A couple of nice things also is there's a concept of flow checker, so which allows you to validate your information when you build a flow, and you can also test out the flow once it's done. I'm not going to save this since this is just a demo. So one other thing I would want to show is when you're trying to work with flows, I'm pulling up one of my older flows that I've executed, not this one. But one thing it allows you to do is it also allows you to see all the history for all the flows. I haven't run this in 28 days, so it's telling me there isn't anything. This gives me the option to look at past history as well. So it's nice to be able to monitor what has happened with the flows that I've built, and it gives you a good view into your past activity, and if you want to use that for historic purposes. I'm going to switch back to my presentation here and dive into the next topic, which is going to be the Common Data Service. Now, the Common Data Service can be thought of very simply as a SQL database. That is a very simple way to put it. Think of it as a SQL database that sits behind all your Power Platform and Power Automate solutions, or any kind of database. So it has similar concepts such as tables and entities and being able to store data, but it also has a lot more enhanced capabilities than what a typical database would. You can actually have business validation rules. You can have role-based security that you can apply to all the data. And when you get your Office 365 license and you try to access your Power Platform, you have an inbuilt version of the CDS, the Common Data Service, which has a lot of common tables that are available, that are used in most organizations, most institutions. Things like accounts, things like address, which is things like user information, which is very common across any organization. So all of that is available natively. So it's very easy to start using that and just start adding data to it. You can also enhance the CDS by adding your own entities and extending the functionality of existing entities as well. Now, let's dive into the licensing. The licensing aspect of Office 365 is kind of interesting. Our Power Platform and Office 365 is kind of interesting. So I wanted to make sure that we dive into this and talk about what the capabilities are. Now, if you're starting off with just your native A1, A3, A5 license of Office 365, you will notice that there is a Power Platform license available. There's a Power Apps and a Power Automate license available. There is also a CDS license available within just the native A1, A3, A5 licenses. And it's available for both students and staff. So what this allows you to do is you can work within the realm of Office 365. So you can build your your Power Apps applications and Power Automate application and workflows, and have it connect to all the built-in and standard connectors that we saw. So being able to send out emails, being able to connect to a SharePoint list, being able to connect to Planner, those are all things which are natively available, and all of that can be built. Apart from that, there are also a few standard connectors available, like being able to link to Facebook or Box. All of that is available as well. So that's where the capability stops when you talk about Office 365. If you want to connect to other applications such as SQL, or if you want to connect to external applications outside of what's available in Office 365, if you want to build your own connectors to connect to on-premises databases that you have, all of that requires an additional license, which is called the Power App Premium license. Now, there's multiple options. This is where it gets a little tricky. There's multiple options when you talk about obtaining a premium license. For anyone that is trying to develop new applications which span all these external integrations, the license to typically obtain is what is considered a per user license, which is $40 per user a month. And they can be basically build unlimited apps with that. Now, for anyone that's accessing these apps, you would also need to have a license for anyone that's accessing them. So that could be obtained at a cost of $10 per user per app. So if you have an app that's used within your admissions department and that's used by 10 people, you can have one person build a whole application, and then 10 other people basically access the application at $100 a month. Now, this is obviously much quicker and simpler than having to build a whole application from scratch, from ground up, and it also makes it very easy to manage and maintain. Now, the other advantage of building apps like this is that you'll automatically get all the audit information. You automatically get all the history information. You automatically get all the troubleshooting capabilities which are built into the platform. So there is nothing additional which will have to happen for all of that. There's also additional licenses which can be obtained. This is where you can get a little more creative with your licensing model. The one thing is there's advanced capabilities with the Power Automate platform, and which is called RPA. One of the options is RPA, which is the robotic process automation. And robotic process automation, you can think of it as any interaction that a user performs on a computer on a repeated basis, which can very easily be automated. So if like a form entry, which where someone's entering information constantly into an application, where the fields are basically the same, but they're entering it over and over the course of a day. Such activities can very easily be automated. You can track the user movements that they perform on a computer, and then you can capture all of that and automate the whole process. So it'll almost be like an end user working and clicking through and completing actions within an application, but all of that can be completely automated. So that is a very powerful tool to use to eliminate a lot of the redundant, a lot of the repetitive work. There is also the AI Builder option, which we'll briefly touch upon. The AI Builder option allows users to be adds into the existing Power Automate capability, and there is it's priced out a little differently. It's $500 per unit, but a calculation of a unit is variable. So the AI Builder, we'll dive into that AI Builder, and then I think this will become a little more clear when I dive into that. There is also the Power Automate per flow plan, which is actually quite helpful if you're building some type of automation, which multiple people are going to be using. So in that scenario, you don't necessarily need to have a per app license, because that could be quite expensive. So if you build an app that's going to be used by hundreds of people, a workflow that's going to be used by hundreds of people, then you could switch over to what is called a per flow plan, where it's basically like an add-on, and then you can have how many ever users try to access that flow. There's also add-on capabilities if you're doing very intense, processing. Most standard free plans come with, I think, 2,000 API calls per day per workflow. But if you're doing heavy processing, then it can be upgraded to up to 10,000 calls a day. The other one that we briefly saw was touched upon was the Power App portals, and for that, there's no additional license for people building these applications, but for any external entities that come in, external users just come in and try to access the application, there is an associated cost of $200 for all the logins, for up to 100 logins, and also $100 for 100,000 page views. So if you have an external portal that you're just supporting, even if it's temporary, you can obtain licenses for just a short period, and then have the portal up and running for just that duration, rather than building something from scratch and have it running running all through the year. If you have any questions about all this, please post. I'll jump in and be able to answer them towards the end. So let's look at a few examples of how this platform is being used in actual educational institutions. So I have a couple of different examples here that I wanted to run through. The first one is the Higher Education Crisis Financial Impact Tracker. This was actually a solution which was created and rolled out, and I believe Purdue is currently using this. This was built as a way for higher education institutions to be able to track their effort lost due to COVID, and use that to apply for relief. So this solution is available. It's a free download. It can be downloaded and installed by any organization. There might be some additional licenses involved based on how it's configured and how it's used, but it's a free solution to download and install. And I'll share some example screenshots of how it works. So this solution basically allows administrators and staff within a university to look through all the sponsored programs, and allows employees to track what their percentage loss is due to COVID, and capture all of that information and make it available. So it just makes it that much easier for higher institutions, organizations to be able to track and capture all of this information in one place. The other example was what is called 8-bit classroom. I don't know if you might have heard about this, but this was kind of inspired by a teacher who was interested in the Power Platform and kind of started playing with it himself. This is why I said it's geared towards a lot of people who might be business users or have a little bit of experience with form development or working with Excel. And in his scenario, his primary use case was, he was using a lot of spreadsheets to track all this classroom activity, manage student information, and so on, and started using the Power Platform to start, automating and building applications around this. Instead of using spreadsheets, started to use Power Apps to build some of these applications. And he also started building more and more applications to make education that much more easy and intuitive for students. And in fact, if you go to 8-bit classroom, there's blog entries of all the different type of applications that he built for students, and even to make simple teaching exercises that much more exciting and interesting. So this is an example of how he was trying to teach acceleration and deceleration, and how all of that works when you try to adjust the different variables. So this is an example of one of the applications that was built and is available. So it's not only applications that you build for back office staff, but these are also applications that can be rolled out to your students to assist with learning and make it more fun and enjoyable. There is also a lot of pre-built templates available with the Power Platform that make it very easy to improve your day-to-day activities and improve your day-to-day efficiency. For instance, there is pre-built templates available to get notification anytime a student completes a quiz. So if you're conducting a quiz, monitoring all this information makes it very easy to get notifications around that. There's also templates to save classroom walkthrough data. There's information. There's templates available where teachers can track all the messages which are posted on Teams. I know there was a session on Teams earlier, so this kind of integrates with that. So if there's all these capabilities, all the messages which come into Teams, all of them can be grouped and categorized and stored into an Excel file, which makes it that much easier to process them subsequently. If there's any analysis that needs to be done, or if there needs to be a summary of all the questions that were raised, anything like that, it makes it that much easier to capture all that information. and also daily email reminders. So this, or it could be scheduled as well. So this is something which could go out as a reminder for for students to complete all their assignments, or submit all their assignments on time, or just a daily reminder to complete certain activities and so on. One thing that I also want to cover, this might be focused a little more towards some of the administrators of Office 365. But when you talk about rolling out Power Platform, there are actually a lot of different things which need to be considered. And I wanted to make sure I briefly touch upon them if you're considering a deployment of Power Platform within your organization, within your institution. The first thing to consider is anytime you deploy a solution, anytime anything is built within Power Platform, it is installed in what is called an environment. With every Office 365 tenant, you always get a default environment, but additional environments can be built, and each environment can have its own database. So there is a way to partition out different environments in an institution. This is something which could be used based on if you want separation between different classes, if you want separation between different departments. There are several reasons why you might want to have separate environments. There's also environments that you might want to separate out based on whether it's going to be a trial environment or a test environment or a production environment. So if there's new tools that are being experimented with, new solutions that you want to play with or figure out if it's ideal for the institution before you roll it out, you can always have a trial environment in which that is tested out before it's pushed out to the production environment. And it's very easy to automate the movement of these solutions that are built between one environment and another. So it also makes it very easy to capture all the information that you have in one environment, export it out, and import it into a different one. The Common Data Service, as I mentioned earlier, is one of the primary tools that is available within the Power Platform to extend the functionality of what you have within your extend the functionality of what can be built with Power Apps. As I mentioned, this has a lot of the robust auditing capabilities already built in. So if you want to have troubleshooting for your data, if you want to be able to track what happens to every single entity that's updated, if you want to be able to build in permissions around the different data, all of that is available. And you can also have a capability for up to 4 terabytes per environment. So there's a lot of capability available for with the CDS for the amount of data you want to store. Obviously, it provides automatic backups, point-in-time restores, and all of that is available. If you build your own application, you have to manage all of that information. So all of that is automatically pre-built into the CDS, so it makes it much more easy to manage and manage the deployment of the applications. When you talk about CDS, there's also when you talk about the Power Platform, there's also different type of roles which can be built in. Not everybody that has access to Power Platform needs to be a developer or a builder. So you can portion it out and have people that are basically administrators, or you can have what are called makers. Makers are the people, or the users who will actually be able to build Power Platform solutions. So in a typical environment, you probably would have all your students as end users and your staff as makers, so they can build applications that they might want to use in a classroom type setting. When you talk about environments that have CDS, this gets a little more involved. There's a lot more feature-rich capability available. Again, this might be more helpful to back office staff type of application focused out there, because you have different types of roles that are available. This might not be something you would typically use in a classroom setting, but more common in a back office type of setting. So just want to make sure this is all thought through when you plan out your deployment. These are all the different roles that you would have to consider. Make sure you have people assigned to each of these roles, and they understand what their capabilities are when you try to roll out the application. The other thing that I also want to mention is what is called the data gateway. Now, this is tied into this is something which is optional to use. This only comes into play when you're trying to integrate with applications which are outside of the realm of what is provided with the Office 365 Power Platform connectors. So if you want to connect to application that you've custom built, which is sitting on your on-premises environment, then you could leverage the data gateway to connect to that. If you have a SQL database that is sitting on premises or any kind of database that's sitting on premises, you can connect to that. You could also use data gateway to surface up information from third-party applications and make it basically available to to your Power Platform. So data gateway is something that can be it can be consumed from a Power App or from a Power Automate flow. So it makes it very easy if you're trying to extend the capability of and try to bring in data from other systems which are not natively supported, which connections to it are not natively supported with Office 365. The other one that I also wanted to cover here is what are called DLP policies, which can be set up. Now, one thing is you saw there were a lot of different connectors available within the Power Platform. So if you're trying to build Power Apps or if you want to make Power Apps available, you can actually shut down a lot of those connectors. For instance, connectors to Facebook or connectors to Twitter. Maybe you don't want social connectors like that available when people are trying to build applications. You might want to shut down connectors to some sensitive apps which you don't want everybody to be using. So the DLP policies allow you to govern your environment and only make those apps and those connectors available that you think are okay for your students and staff to use. So it's very easy to create policies which blocks all of that information as well. And finally, there is the option of setting up what is called a Center of Excellence. Now, this is something that Microsoft has made available for monitoring and administering your Power Platform environment. If you notice with the Power Platform environment, it's a little tricky to try to identify what apps everybody has built. So if you have multiple people building apps, multiple students trying to build apps, it could become a little tricky and difficult to manage what's happening in the entire environment and your entire Power Platform environment. So the COE helps you, manage all of that. It gives you reports on things like, who are the heaviest users, which connectors are being used, which apps are the most active, which users are creating the most apps, and so on. And there's several components available as part of the COE. It's quite common to ask about, what is RPN a day and what are some of the options available when you talk about the Power Platform. So as far as where to start, the Power Platform can be a new area, and it's sometimes could be a little difficult to wrap your head around it. It's not as intuitive as some of the other tools where you just plug in and start using it. This requires a little bit of development that might be required. So as far as where to go from here, there's multiple options available. We do offer what is called App in a Day, which is a very immersive workshop where participants can dive in and get hands-on experience with building applications. This is something where we'll step through. It'll be a hands-on experience where each person is able to log into Office 365. They have their own tenant. They have their own access to. They have their own licenses for the Power Platform, and they can build their own solutions. And it's a step-by-step. Walks you through all the different areas that we covered today. The other one, RPN a Day, which touches upon some of the advanced scenarios, is more so geared towards leveraging things like AI Builder, things like automation, and additional connectors which are available for teams. So it dives into a little more of those advanced capabilities. And the other one is if you're looking to roll out Power Platform for the entire organization, there is a week-long engagement where we can cover all the governance aspects of the Power Platform, help deploy the COE that I briefly mentioned earlier, and also go through education and training for what the Power Platform capabilities are, and go through the App in a Day education process as well. Since we have a few minutes here, I'm going to dive into a couple of other areas which I left open to see if you have time towards the end. So one of the things I'm going to dive into is what is called AI Builder. So this is a new feature which is available with Office 365. This does require the additional license, but for people that are interested in trying to know more about this, the AI Builder allows for building solutions based on these predefined templates that are available. So you can actually have models that you build, which does form processing, which does entity extraction, object detection, and so on. So, for instance, if you're trying to analyze pictures, you can build a model and feed that into a Power Automate flow where you can actually identify and detect what the object is, and perform processing based on that. There is a few steps involved when you try to build solutions with AI Builder. There is a process of training your model, so you have to provide enough inputs to the model that you leverage before it is ready to start functioning and integrating into a Power Automate solution. So these are the different options available. So you can build based on those different templates, and there's also different models that are available. I created a model here for invoice processing. So I can open it up just to show you what it looks like. In this example, there was a document which was provided. So this is more so for invoice processing. So if you notice, there was a document that I leveraged here, where these could be documents coming in through an email. It could be coming in via a scanner where it's processing this information and putting it into a drive somewhere. But no matter what the source of these documents are, you can actually use AI Builder to be able to capture all of this information. So there is a little bit of training which has to happen, where you provide a different sample so it knows where to pull this information from. But I had this model to pick a few different fields: date, bill to, contact, and total. So I can train my AI model to work with these kind of documents and attachments which come in, and this can all be integrated into a Power Platform or Power Automate workflow as well. So it's very easy to capture all this information and then maybe store them in a separate backend system that you might have. So I wanted to touch upon this. I know this is slightly more advanced, but these are some of the capabilities of the Power Platform that it's always helpful to know. We might not need this right away, but it's always helpful to know what else is out there.